In my life, growing up in a rather peculiar melting pot of religious fervor in central West New Jersey, my moral code was value added by respect given towards everyone's beliefs. I was the only member of my particular faith in my high school, and the respect I got among my peers was, in retrospect, over the top phenomenal. Oh, the stories I could share. If I were to go back to being a teenager, stay rooted in those formative moral values that somehow became ingrained in me, and in my siblings and all my friends, yet do so in 2021, the morality of so many of my childhood friends would be noticeably different. Mind you, I said if I could be the kid rooted in those formative moral values shared by all my peers and family in my youth in the 60s and the 70s. Minus this part of my monologue, who knows what I would believe or the quality of kid I would become. Respect for others' values and virtues today ends where leftist views have become the indoctrinated moral code. I hope you enjoy my snippet from a group of 3 Prager University kids that are grounded in enviable virtues, reflective of beating the odds in the downturn of the rising generation. Pay close attention and comment if you have the time.
And it relates to a KGB story that we are going to get to a little later. But first, we're going to start off with this story out of Los Angeles, our home, our pride, our not so much joy. Now, here's the headline. Classroom decorations at Alexander Hamilton High School in Los Angeles include F the Police and F America with 3 Ks, notice that, posters, flags representing Palestine, and Black Lives Matter.
Now, you say elementary school? Or what age school is
this? This is high school. This is a high school. So Alexander Hamilton High, which is interesting that it's called Alexander Hamilton High, here in Los Angeles, in specifically Los Angeles Unified School District, which we've been having a lot of problems with when it comes to CRT, indoctrination, gender theory, horrible sex education. But here's the photo coming out of this classroom here. You can see the pride flag here, you can see the Black Lives Matter flag, you can see the trans flag, you can see the Palestinian flags, and then here's F the Police and F America with KKK in the middle of it.
What does the poster actually say? I can't read it.
This is native land, settler colonialism, genocide, slavery, imperialism, war on drugs, Jim Crow, prison something. I don't know what that last word is.
It's like a bunch of random buzzwords.
It is.
Anti-American buzzwords on a poster, and then a picture of Christopher Columbus. Then it's like America, KKK. This is like when you don't know the answer to a test, and so you write like everything that you thought you knew to try and get as many credit points as possible.
Right. In what way has America wronged people? Genocide, slavery, Jim Crow, like anything you can think of.
If this guy's your teacher and you write all those answers on the test, you're getting an A+.
Yes, you are.
It's probably like a math class or something, too. I would be interested to know the race of the person who's a teacher.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, guys, I have not. I'm sorry.
Fine.
I'm so sorry. Now we're going to get to the story that relates to our skit that we did earlier about the KGB. This is somebody who was very active in my red pilling experience, and that is Yuri Besmanov. I found one of his videos where he talked about the idea of ideological subversion, although he says it with a Russian accent, and it's much cooler. And here's that interview. We're going to talk about how this is happening here in America and how people don't tend to realize it. Let's get into it.
Yuri Besmanov?
Yuri Besmanov. This is from 1984.
He killed the Minotaur, right?
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna play the video.
Okay.
Besmanov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism.
Does that sound familiar at all? Does it sound like the story that we just covered? It's very, very clear that this is happening in America. And again, this video is from 1984. So he was warning us about this back then. Look at how far we've gone since then.
The decline of the West from within.
The important point that he makes, it just very quickly here, is despite the abundance of information.
Exactly.
Despite the abundance of information, and he's going to elaborate on that, but it's so true. Despite all the information that we have right in front of our faces, we still fall into these ideological holes.
The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his bones, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation.
And that's a very crass way of saying what we've said on the show for a very, very long time, is that you don't understand the failings of your ideology, the failings of what you legislate and what you change in your society until it harms you. And until it harms you almost in a way that is inescapable and irreversible. And that's exactly the point that he makes here.
No, the way he described it is pretty irreversible.
Yeah,
that would hurt.
That's pretty harmful.
That would wake me up for sure.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before, like the quote, only way character changes is pain. Like that's why, like when you're raising a kid, there have to be consequences to their actions, because that's how they learn. And I wonder, and we've talked about this in recent weeks as well, is like where is the rock bottom? And as long as people, like especially elites, can be insulated from the policies that they keep voting for, that harm the lower class people, as long as they're still insulated from that, they're not going to feel the pain of their own terrible ideas. And we also you can look at like economically, we keep kicking the can down the road with the debt, and it's like we're not feeling the pain, we're kicking it off to future generations. And there will be a reckoning. You cannot just make withdrawals forever. That you're going to have to pay the debt that you owe, and we owe a debt to the truth. We owe a debt to facts. We owe a debt to good values and morals. And you can't keep going further and further down the rabbit hole without it coming to bite you, and it will.
Yeah, it's like you either make a deal with the devil or you make a deal with God. You're gonna have to choose. Say like what type of life am I going to live? And it's interesting. When I was in college and everything, and eventually I was on the left and then an atheist, and then you start hearing what the truth is, all the conservative thoughts, and listening to the best thinkers and reading, and you're like, wow, the world is so much different than I thought.
Like we always say,
Stockholm syndrome.
everybody who you vote for or who sits in power is capable of fixing all the problems that they scream about, and they just choose not to because they thrive on problems. We have no politicians if we don't have problems. We have no bureaucrats if we don't have problems. So it is in their best interest to keep those problems alive. Let's keep going.
Demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. And it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis.
Let's stop on destabilization before he gets to the next one. But it is really interesting. Again, this was filmed in 1984, and he's citing that the process started 25 years prior. So 1959. And now we are nearly 40 years ahead from there. That is terrifying. And he talks about defense contractors and our economy, our central banking system, and he talks about how they are some of the most influential when it comes to this Marxist-Leninist ideology. Have we not covered stories of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and JP Morgan and American Express and all of these massive companies that are in line with centralized banking and defense contracting that are covering CRT, which is essentially racialized Marxism?
He's talking about.
And it only gets worse from here. He's talking about it from the perspective of, oh, this is happening covertly, and I'm just trying to let you know that this is happening, and it's going to come to fruition, and it's going to get louder and louder. Now we're in the stage here in America where it's happening overtly. So very, very scary. Let's hear about stage 3.
It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not.
And he talks about how rapidly a country can enter into crisis. Can you remember maybe a pandemic crisis that we rapidly entered into very quickly in this country? I don't know, maybe 2 years ago?
Never heard of her.
Never heard of her.
Doesn't ring a bell.
And then he says a violent shift in power in our leadership in a country. Did we not also experience that? Although I would call it more of a Cold War violence than actual violence. Definitely experienced that as well. So at what stage are we in this process? The very last stages of this process.
It seems like it's already over. It seems like we're just living in a new reality.
Normalization.
Yeah.
Exactly. Things are becoming normalized in an overwhelming sense. All of these social issues that we talk about are becoming normalized. So
if you're still a free-thinking person who would rather bet on yourself than the government to determine the course of your life and take care of you, you're now in the minority. You are the rebel. You're the radical minority.
You're the counter.
Yeah. And you are the strange person.